Well, good morning, and welcome to this session. Just happens it's the first session of the morning. You know, I used to live in the Philippines, and usually we do icebreakers, but I won't impose that on all of you for this morning. Well, this session is aimed at launching a new policy white paper. And the title of the white paper is Efficient Agriculture, Stronger Economies in ASEAN. Okay? And here's a preview of it. Well, let me just start by introducing the panelists. It's the first time I'm meeting some of them. So on my left is Malavika, Jain Bambawale, who's at Accenture. She's the Director of Sustainability Services, Management Consulting at Accenture. And next to her is Dr. Harvey Glick, who's the Asia Regional Director, Regulatory Policy and Scientific Affairs from Monsanto. And next to Harvey is Lucita Jasmin, who is with April. That stands for Asia Pacific Resources International Holdings Limited. And she's the Director for Sustainability and External Affairs. So the panelists will have a chance to share with you what they have put in the white paper. Let me perhaps make some preparatory remarks regarding the white paper. The paper has been prepared with a lot of support from a very diverse group of stakeholders interested in sustainability, agriculture, and of course, economies, stronger economies. These stakeholders include Syngenta, the Business Council for Sustainable Development and its partners, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam, and also the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Also includes companies like Accenture, the Bank of the Philippines, BPI Foundation, the April Group, Frontier Strategy Group, Monsanto, CropLife Asia, and Grow Asia. The paper was prepared to provide policymakers with an overview of how different organizations and sectors perceive the challenges and opportunities from sustainable agriculture in ASEAN, and how agriculture in fact contributes to a strong economy. Therein lies the link. As you read the white paper later on, you'll find that the early sections in the paper provide the background and context within which agriculture and its two major shareholders, government and business, operate. In the white paper, we explicate several aspects of this context of environment in which agriculture functions. In particular, climate change, that I'm sure we're all very familiar with, food security, increasingly inclusive supply chains that involve smallholders, and also the importance of harmonization, especially in crop protection regulations, an issue that's very germane to this region. I think we all know that as ASEAN's population grows and its middle class increases, the demand is not only for more food, but for more diverse food, as a result of which the challenges to the natural resource base are very real. In my real job, I research food security and the interlink between technology and policy. So those are very real links indeed, especially the challenges to the natural resource base. Now, the latest sections of the white paper share viewpoints, what we're terming in the white paper business solutions. It gives you a kind of a deeper lens to look into how one can articulate policy at a broad level, but you've got to have specific on-the-ground examples of how to translate some of these policy imperatives into action. So the companies that have volunteered to share this each have chapters in the white paper to show how they've actually done it. Yeah? Now, part of my kind of preparatory comments too, I think, relates to the central role of agriculture. I think we're all aware that agriculture continually becomes less and less of the GDP in most of our ASEAN countries. And yet agriculture still provides a lot of means of livelihood to big parts of the population in ASEAN. And we also know that the interface between government and business, the multiplier effect, where one translates basically agriculture into agribusiness, is a very big multiplier. There's been some excellent work done in the Philippines that really highlights this. The multiplier effects, where you go from public to private, can be as much as 2, 3, and 4 times that much. Yeah? So definitely, as we go forward, we see the alignment here between government goals for example, articulated ASEAN to the ASEAN 2020 vision and very specific imperatives, okay, that we have to practice basically to align business with those goals. And this white paper gives many of those examples. So with that as an introduction, let me now call on our panelists, each of which has contributed a chapter to the white paper, to share the highlights of their particular chapter, okay, in the context of this conference, and also in the context of the white paper, which is efficient agriculture, stronger economies in ASEAN. So let me call on Malavika first to give her perspectives. She's with Accenture, as I've indicated.
Thank you, Professor Paul, and congratulations on pronouncing my name correctly. It's a very complicated name. So today I'm going to talk about digital technologies and the potential that these technologies have to actually improve agricultural performance as well as livelihoods of farmers. Digital technologies are making complete inroads into every other sector, right? We're talking about banking, we're talking about resources, we're talking about infrastructure. So why not agriculture? And I will talk about what these technologies are doing specifically for smallholder farmers. You know, I want to give some examples from around the world before then zooming into Southeast Asia. And the point I want to really make is about why, you know, why can't we improve the scale and speed with which things are happening here? And I have had conversations, and I have been having conversations with people on the floor about why things can't go at scale and speed, but let's leave that open and maybe just hear me out. So there are four basic ways in which digital technologies can help agriculture. The first is provision of agricultural specialized information. So I'm not talking about generic information, but specialized research facilities or information banks where agronomists get together and create databases, which are then made available to farmers over mobile, using, for example, subscription services or any kind of training or coaching to farmers on a regularized, systematized basis. And this is being done, there are several examples of this, and we're talking about information such as weather forecasts or dosage guidance or crop-related specialized information. So for example, in India, you have Reuters Market Light, which is now quite popular, and I believe 70% of the farming population in India is subscribing to this, so millions of farmers are using this. The second is access to financial services, and here I think there is one statistic that says that there are about smallholder farmers actually require about $450 billion worth of finance, but only 2% of this is actually available to them. And this was really brought home to me yesterday at the Palm breakout when the smallholder farmer Pak Bambong mentioned that one of the key things that is holding back smallholder farmers is availability of resource. And the investment that they have to put in, and the fact that they have to really make an effort to save money in order to plan this. So why is it that they don't have access to financial services? And of course, this is the case all over the world. But it is simplified in many cases with the availability of mobile money, or and this is very popular. Has become very popular in countries where financial institutions are not that deeply entrenched in rural areas. For example, in the case of Africa. Now, in India, it's also taking off, but in India, the financial institutions, the regional rural banks, are fairly strong at the grassroots level, but not the case in Africa. So in Africa, this has really taken off. So you have a lot of examples. For example, in Kenya, Syngenta has launched a crop life insurance system to reduce the burden of weather-related disasters for farmers. In Zambia, mobile transactions, which is a mobile company, has coordinated with Donovan, which is a cotton trading company, to provide access to payment for 70,000 of their cotton farmers. And this actually helps the private company Donovan to secure those the supply from these farmers so that they don't jump ship and go to some other farmers, for example. Thirdly, and I think most importantly, this resonates with everybody, is access to marketplace services. So one of the key issues really is that farmers don't know what the price of their product is. And there is no transparency in the supply chain. And what if they're relying on just a handful of people, maybe some officers, maybe the middleman, to tell them what is happening in the supply chain. Now, if that transparency was made more transparent, English, then it would really make a huge difference, right? So this is one of the key things that mobile technologies can do. And again, examples from around the world. For example, Vodafone in Egypt has launched a service called Forza, which is an online bartering platform. In Tanzania, Tigo is developing a service to offer farmers this kind of information. Again, in Uganda, the mobile service provider is working with Google to create Google Trader, which is an online platform where farmers have information on products, prices, and they can do trading. So again, there are examples that abound. And fourthly is supply chain efficiency and traceability. So traceability, of course, is a very hot topic now. Everybody's worried about it. Everybody talks about it. And it's not just driven by environmental needs, but also by food safety related issues. And traceability is, again, enabled beautifully by mobile technologies, both at the very advanced level. So, for example, in South Africa, SACO Systems is tagging, using RFID to tag their livestock and then trace it all the way to Europe where the export is made. To more simpler technologies. So, for example, in the case of Vodafone, is working with dairy farmers in Kenya to track milk supplies and to provide accurate records of milk transactions and how milk is moving across the chain. And this has really worked very well in drastically reducing theft as well, because now people have information about when, where, and how much milk was transported at what price. In India, the government is working on something called GrapeNet, which is a web-based platform where they track grape export to Europe to make sure that the pesticide levels are in line with the regulation. So there are many such examples. And also here at home in Southeast Asia, there are many examples. I mean, there's 8 desa, or 8 villages, I think that many of you may have heard of, which has launched mobile services like Patani. Then there is Lisa, which is a social networking tool for farmers. There is Andara Link Mobile, I believe, which has launched mobile money. I think the Institute of Technology Bandung is also developing SAPA Mobile, which is again a mobile-based supply chain tracking tool. The RRRI, the International Rice Research Institute in Philippines, is doing a wonderful job with the Rice Crop Manager and this online database which also provides SMS-based information to farmers. In Cambodia, etc. So there are many examples, but I guess the point I want to make is that, given the impact that this kind of technology has, there is a case for maybe doing a little bit more. And when I talk to people, I kind of begin to understand that there's a chicken-egg situation. The entrepreneurs are waiting for platforms to get adopted, whereas the people are waiting for the people are waiting for a business case, and if the platform isn't there, then the speed and scale is not going to happen. So there is perhaps a case for public-private partnerships to help to provide funding and improve the scale at which these things are happening. And of course, there are other things that maybe I'll talk about later that can help to scale up these technologies. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, well, thank you. That's very comprehensive coverage indeed of what's in your chapter. At this point, let me ask Harvey now to share with us your perspective.
Well, thank you very much, Paul, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I do want to add my thanks to Constant and the Business Council for Sustainable Development for doing such a great job in driving this policy paper that I think will be very helpful to us. We at Monsanto are very proud to be a part of this initiative. We are primarily a seed technology company, and we develop and distribute improved high-yielding seeds across the region. And one of the contributions we made to this policy report was the story of the introduction of these new high-yielding, genetically improved seeds, corn seeds, in the Philippines. And this was really a long collaboration between the private sector, the Philippine government, the academic community, and the Philippine NGO community. And the key milestone was in the year of 2002, when the Philippine government approved for the very first time in Asean the regulation of these new improved genetically engineered corn seeds and made them available to Philippine farmers for the first time. Now, these were grown by farmers, millions of farmers for many years in other countries, but were not yet available here in ASEAN. So the Philippine government took a very strong leadership position in developing a risk assessment framework to allow these seeds to be rigorously tested for safety and then made available to the Philippine farming community. And the critical element, as we discussed yesterday, the real facilitating moment was the development of this science-based, pragmatic, and operational regulatory framework. And this allowed the Philippine scientists to do a rigorous assessment of safety and ensure that there were no concerns about this new technology. So since the introduction of these new improved corn seeds in the Philippines, there's been a lot of work to say, what have been the impacts on Philippine agriculture? Has this made a contribution to sustainable food security? And if you look at the results, there are three consistent trends that have emerged for the farmers who have started planting these new improved corn seeds in the Philippines. First, they have significantly increased their yield, in some cases as much as 20 or 30% compared to the conventional corn hybrids that they used to plant. The second finding was that they were able to reduce the amount of insecticide sprays required to protect the corn, because these corn seeds have natural technology inside the seed that provides some protection against insects. And so the farmers did not have to make as many sprays in their field. And the third point was that farmers became more profitable. At the end of the day, the combination of higher yields and lower production costs because of less chemical inputs produced the result of having more money in their pocket at the end of the day. So this was quite a development in Philippine agriculture. In essence, what it's done is it's made the Philippine corn farmer more efficient. Because today, a Philippine corn farmer, to grow 1 unit of corn, he uses less land, he uses less water, he uses less fertilizer, he uses less pesticide, he uses less labor, which was discussed yesterday, which is becoming harder to find in rural areas and becoming more expensive. This allowed him to reduce his labor. So he's become a more efficient corn farmer. And in fact, this is one small example of an approach to sustainable intensification of agriculture in the Philippines. So what were the learnings in working to achieve this introduction in the Philippines? The most important learning was that it was really hard. I don't want to lie to you and say it was an easy process. It was a long, difficult process. There were speed bumps along the way that needed to be resolved. But what was important was there was a shared goal by the three stakeholders. The Philippine government truly believed that this technology could help raise the livelihoods and the productivity of corn farmers in the Philippines. So they had a vested interest to see this technology be made available in their country. The farm NGOs also had a vested interest because they also thought this technology would be useful in the toolbox that farmers had available to them to help them increase their yields and their livelihoods. And the private sector had a vested interest as well because they thought these new seeds with their new technology would be competitive in the marketplace and attract strong sales from Philippine farmers. So these shared goals and political will and the development of trust over the long process was what enabled us to get over the inevitable speed bumps that come along the way and allowed us to reach this milestone. The other learning was something discussed yesterday, and that was scale. We observed that seed technology is scale neutral. These seeds were adopted very quickly by smallholder farmers in the Philippines. And the reason is all the technology is put inside the seed. So if the farmer uses a tractor, or if he still plants using a stick to make a hole and dropping the seed in by hand, he can use the same seed regardless of his farming system. And therefore, there was relatively quick adoption. In some cases, it reached 80% in some of the key corn areas of the Philippines. Scalability was something else that was discussed, and scalability of projects is difficult. But our learning was that if the technology provides visible, significant, and measurable benefits, the farming community is very quick to pick up on this. If they see their neighbor getting 20 or 30% higher yields, they're going to find out what he's doing and do a test on their farm. And so this technology scaled up very, very quickly, largely by word of mouth and with a little bit of extension support from various parties. So that's a very quick overview and some of the learnings of the process of introducing new genetically improved corn seed technology in the Philippines.
Excellent. And for more details, grab your copy later on and read. Okay, I have the pleasure now to call on Lucita Jasmin, and her contribution to the white paper was on a landscape approach to conserving forested areas. So Lucita, please.
Yes, thanks so much, Paul. Good morning, everyone. And maybe after a very proper introduction by Harvey to my country, I can actually greet you in my vernacular. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. That actually means a beautiful morning to everyone. Oh, okay.
So I would like to say thanks to the BCSD as well, because this is a great opportunity for us to contribute to the white paper. It's actually good value to be able to strengthen that interface between practice and policy, if only to ensure contextual relevance to policy development, whether at national or regional levels. Now, for our chapter, as Paul has mentioned, we chose to focus on a critical challenge, which in my view is also one of the greater opportunities for sustainable development in Indonesia and in the whole of ASEAN, in fact. And that topic is the protection of conservation of forest resources. Now, we all know in Indonesia there are around 50 to 60 million people who actually rely on the forest resources for their livelihood. And 30 million people actually still live below the poverty line. Now, in the face of such significant social and economic pressure on forest resources, we've all witnessed how unmanaged forests in Indonesia have been vulnerable to degradation, illegal conversion, poor agricultural practices, chief of which is, of course, burning. We've all read from various reports that last year's burning alone actually cost the country 2.6 million hectares of forests, which resulted in $16 billion of economic losses. Now, in our view, born of more than 2 decades of actual experience on the ground, conservation can only happen if there is an active system of management and protection in place. Now, leaving the forest alone is not a viable option in the context of a developing country like Indonesia. And the private sector can play a significant role in responsibly managing the forests, whether it is for production, conservation, or restoration. If I may be allowed to step back a bit, back in my days when I was working with the UN Environment Program, one of the key concepts that we were advocating with governments is that of decoupling. Now, what this actually means is basically delinking growth from further calls on our natural capital. In other words, we can pursue growth even if we stay within the planet's safe operating space or regenerative capacity. Now, so the unique contribution of our chapter is that we are actually illustrating how the forest-based industries in Indonesia can lead this whole shift towards decoupling by balancing production with protection and conservation. Now, the way we do this in April is by adopting the landscape approach. And I'm sure you've heard this buzzword at so many events like this. And I guess ultimately what matters is how genuinely and effectively it is implemented on the ground. Now, for us, a landscape approach is basically a strategy that integrates conservation with economic growth and at the same time a socially inclusive framework for community engagement. So by adopting a landscape approach, a business necessarily also takes on a broader view to the business case for conservation. What we mean by this is that a business will have to start accounting for the natural capital as part of the long-term valuation of the business. So this, of course, includes the ecosystem services that nurture the plantations and the community life, the functioning of the community life in the areas, the biodiversity values, and at the same time the carbon stocks. Now, how are we applying this? One of the examples that we cited in the paper is our 1-for-1 goal, where basically we conserve a hectare for every hectare that we plant. Given the 400,000 hectares that we have as conservation and restoration areas, we are actually at 83% of this goal. Now, beyond that, we have also started conducting carbon, community, and biodiversity studies in one of the landscapes within our concessions, because at the end of the day, we also want to see whether the math does add up, whether in fact we are able to balance our conservation with production, because it's not just enough to say it's 1-for-1. We need to know whether the values are actually in fact balanced. Now, another example that we cited in the paper is, of course, our fire management approach, which in our case is integrated into the holistic approach of landscape management. Now, for the complexity of fire as an issue, fire management cannot be treated as isolated initiatives. It needs to be part of a confluence of factors. To begin with, it needs to start with the design of the landscape. In our case, we designed the landscape in a way where the plantations actually protect the conservation and the restoration areas by forming a ring fence around them. It also includes, of course, the way we manage, how effectively we manage the water level, especially in the case of our peatlands. Now, there is also the fundamental responsibility of having adequate resources for early detection and fire suppression. And this needs to happen within and outside our concession boundaries. And finally, beyond that, looking at a long-term solution, there has got to be an aspect of prevention as well. And this we do by working with the communities. And this is a long-term engagement program of about 3 to 5 years that is embodied by what we call the Fire-Free Village program. It is not enough to tell the communities not to burn. You have to be able to empower the communities and offer them alternatives to land clearing that do not involve burning. So this holistic approach to fire management has given us some promising results in 2015 during the worst possible El Nino crisis that Indonesia and the rest of the region actually suffered. With the villages alone, we actually observed a 90% decline in the number of fire incidences. So to conclude, our chapter actually offers a number of recommendations to policymakers, but the main call basically is to have a stronger, more holistic conservation framework that involves active management and protection of forests, and that also integrates the need and the role of the communities. And I guess as a final point, it's also important to establish that the white paper's reference to efficient agriculture, this concept of efficiency, I guess, takes on a broader view. It's not just your usual concept of efficiency as such, but it assumes more the meaning of sustainability. And by this we mean agriculture can actually pursue growth within the sector, but ultimately decoupling it from negative resource impact.
Excellent.
Thanks, Paul.
Well, I think the 3 presentations have tickled your interest in the white paper, I hope anyways, yeah? I think it's obvious that, there are some undercurrents here and also underpinning points that come across. One of which is that there is a strong business case to be made to adopt sustainability as part of business practice, yeah? And I couldn't help but notice that all 3 speakers, in fact, touch on farmer empowerment as well. Information, seeds, and in your case, I think access, to kind of what I would call common resources, yeah, within a sustainable landscape. Okay, I think those are very key points you need to take home. And I also want to mention that when we started developing this white paper, we actually used the lens of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which had a vision 2050, and basically we disaggregated using that big vision to the ASEAN region to ask the question, how can businesses in ASEAN grow sustainably and be direct contributors to the ASEAN vision itself? I'm not really making a pitch here, but just sharing with you that I think there are many useful learnings from the white paper that you'll find once you pick up a copy. I'm not sure how much time the MC is going to allow us. According to my clock here, it says 4 more minutes. Yeah? Perhaps in the time left, let me give an opportunity to each of the panelists here to give us one parting message, take-home message. What action could one take? from your chapter.
Okay, I think one of the things that I talked about earlier was that the private sector is beginning to get involved in, doing a few sample projects on mobile technologies with farmers, but they're tentative because they're waiting for the business case, a strong business case to scale things up, right? So I think I just want to say as a parting that perhaps governments and private sector can work together, and government can provide that scale, that empowerment to farmers, or that kind of a framework through which the private sector can be ensured that there will be a business case in the future to take stronger, faster action. And also things like improving mobile coverage, helping encourage mobile platforms that can help to improve the whole technology.
Thank you.
I would make 2 quick points with regard to sustainable food security in ASEAN. First, it's going to take innovative technology and innovative policy if we're going to achieve these goals. And if you look at agriculture right now, it's busting with fascinating new technology. So I think the technology, the creativity is there. We now have the hard work of putting together innovative policy to allow these technologies to reach the marketplace. And the second quick point, we need to keep the farmer firmly in the center of all our efforts as we introduce these new innovative technologies and policies.
Thanks. Okay. I guess the first point in the context of ASEAN is to recognize or to be reminded that we're all working towards a common future. So the blame game, the finger pointing, it hasn't really helped anyone, not in the last several decades, in fact. Now, businesses need to deliver on our commitments, companies like us. There's no such thing as talking our way out of a problem, talking our way into a solution. No, we are the duty bearers. We translate policy into action. We need to deliver on those. And finally, just as specific to our chapter, leaving the forests alone is a surefire way of inviting illegal conversion and burning. A system of active management and protection allows for both production, conservation, and protection, while enabling economic growth in the communities as well.
Thanks, Paul.
Excellent. I think with that, we've probably used up our time. But let me just end by saying that, this is just a sampling of the authors. You can see the passion that's gone into the writing. Yeah? And I think it really shows through in this white paper. Okay? And at the same time, being able to link practicalities with policy at a broad level. But what is always lacking in the past in meetings that you have policy discussions without the practical examples. So here you do have some business solutions given in the white paper. So I would urge you, pick up a copy. I believe it's outside, right? As you leave, I was told that there are limited copies. I'm sure we'll have enough for all of you. So thank you very much for that. Thank you.